Hello. All right, so this is going to be a brief tutorial on Fusion 2D sketching. And yeah, I'll teach you most of the skills that we use at Astro Orbit. I'm not sure if this video will be public or if it'll just be for internal use. It doesn't really matter. But this gives you a good rundown of what in my opinion are some of the most important things in 2D sketching for Fusion. So first off, I'm going to explain how CAD software works so that you can understand how to just even approach problems. So if you're let's say I'm trying to make a box. It's not like Tinkercad where you just put a box in there. You define it in 2D and then you define it in 3D, if that makes any sense. So what you do is you click a plane. So remember back in geometry how you had different planes that things can exist in it within? So you got and up here you can see the view cube. You got your X, your Y, and your Z. And you can put it on any of these faces. So we're just going to do it from this one, the top. It's the most simple. So if I want to make a box, and I want it to be 100 millimeters, 100 by 150, you define it by that, and then you extrude it. Let's say 200. Boom, we have a box. Pretty simple, pretty basic, but that's just that way you can understand how CAD works at a basic level. You make a 2D drawing or a 2D profile, and then you extrude it or revolve it or sweep it or loft it. Those are a bunch of different ways to take a 2D thing into a 3D thing. And there's plenty more as well. Like there's coil and a bunch of other ones. There's like the other thing with CAD is you're never going to learn everything. With Fusion, you might get pretty close to learning everything because it's not that advanced. But with Inventor, SolidWorks, NX, or I think Cadia might be one. I forget if that's a CAD software or a simulation tool or a math tool. Something like that. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. So now I'm going to shrink my head down now that I'm not like addressing the camera as much so you guys can see everything. All right. So the important thing, so thinking back to geometry class if you've taken it at this point. So there's a bunch of different ways. So we're going to start with a basic line. You can click on the line or you can hit L on your keyboard in order to do line. You can do this. You can make a line over here. You can make a line over here. Like it's just a line. It's pretty simple. But now I'm going to show you one of the most important tools within Fusion. It's called the dimension tool. So like let's say I want this to be this long. Like let's say I want it to be 200 millimeter. Let's say I made it this long. But oh no, I accidentally made it 250 instead of 200. I can go back. If you hit the D key on your keyboard or hit sketch dimension, I just recommend hitting D. Oh, another thing. On your keyboard, I'd recommend having your right hand on the mouse and your left hand on over the space bar. Ready to hit Control D and S are very useful. And V and C also get used a lot, as well as X. So like I would just have your left hand in like the home position on the keyboard if I were you. So let's say, oh no, I accidentally made this 250 instead of 200. So let's add a dimension. If you hit D, you click on that, boom, you can do 250. Pretty simple. But the dimension tool has a lot of other use cases than that. Like I think this would be a good profile for teaching. Okay, so boom, I made a closed shape, which therefore it is a I think it's a polygon then. Yeah. So let's say I wait, let me change one more thing. I'm doing this semi on the fly. There we go. So we made this face. Pretty cool. But let's say I want to edit the dimension between this and this. Let's say I want this to be 50 millimeters. Okay. So what you do is you hit D, you click on that, then you click on that. Boom. Oh, it defined it as that. So another thing is you can only define distances between points, 2 points. So if I did a distance between this and this, we're cool. But you can't define a distance between things that are not parallel. And you'll notice that these things aren't parallel. And this thing actually isn't vertical. You notice how this lines up with that? And on the grid, it doesn't line up with that? That was a mistake I purposely made. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a thing called constraints. So constraints are ways that you can define things instead of through numbers, through geometry concepts, which is a significantly better way to go about constraining things. And if you're doing things with all dimensions, your sketches are going to be incredibly cluttered. They're going to be hard to edit. You want to use geometry wherever possible. And if you're at rocket and if you're at astral orbit, your sketches will get changed by me eventually, and everyone's just use geometry sketches instead of dimensions whenever you can, because it's better. So this is supposed to be perfectly vertical. There's a couple ways that you could define that. We know that this is already horizontal. So one way I could do it is I can make it perpendicular with the perpendicular tool, which is right here. Boom, now it's vertical. Oh, another thing that I should say within Fusion. You notice how this line is white? Generally speaking, if a line is white, it's fully defined and all good. Like, it is properly located. Like, Fusion knows everything it needs to know about this line properly. It knows what angle it's at, it knows where it starts, it knows where it ends, it knows how long it is. It knows what it's located relative to other things. You want to get everything within Fusion white. So let's make this perpendicular. Boom. Now that line is also located. Within Fusion, it's a little weird because, like, we don't technically know everything because we don't know how tall it is, but, like, that's besides the point. You just want to make everything white. Another thing you want to do is whenever you're sketching, if you notice blue lines, what you can do is you can move them around, and that's bad because you'll eventually move something on accident. And what you can do from that is I like to move things around the sketch and be like, oh, okay, that's something I can move, then I undo it, and then I define it. That's a way I go around about things. It's a very good way of doing things. The other way you can do it is that you can locate this line is the horizontal vertical tool. What's that? It makes things perfectly horizontal or perfectly horizontal or perfectly vertical. I know I got that backwards, which is weird. So you can do a couple interesting things with this tool. Oh, I should have made this sketch. I'm going to put a notch in this because that would be more useful. I was going to teach something different with that, but I realized that's pointless. Okay, so boom, we have a sketch. So I want this line to be perfectly straight up. The other way we could do it is by using horizontal vertical. If you click on it, then boom, it goes perfectly horizontal. You'll also notice that with this line, I didn't get it perfectly horizontal. If you click on it, now it's perfectly horizontal. Great. Okay. So another tool that's very useful is you can make things, so I want this to be perfectly vertical as well. Another way you can do that is you can make it parallel with it. Make it parallel with that. And it doesn't work for just that. You could make two lines that aren't perfectly horizontal with each other, that aren't like perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal, parallel. This works for everything. So boom. It works for a lot of things. Also, get used to jumping around to backspace and delete a lot. And also this area I don't use much. If you hold right click, it brings up a little menu. I don't use it much, but I'm told it's very useful. So I gotta learn to use it. So if you're noticing with this sketch, there's a couple things that we don't really know about it currently. Like, we don't know the angle of this. I want this to be 30 degrees, I think. No, 60. So if you two lines that aren't parallel with each other, if you dimension them, then you can set the angle. So I want this to be 60 degrees. Boom. But I also want to know the distance between this. I want this to be 50 millimeters. So what you can do is you can click between two lines if they are parallel with each other. You don't necessarily need to have defined them as parallel, but if they are parallel, then you can do this. So this would be 50. You could also dimension, if they aren't parallel, you can dimension from a point to a line or point to point or a couple other things. Another thing you can do is you can dimension in Fusion. One of the things I like about Fusion better than Inventor is you can dimension lines that are diagonal. Well, at least you can immediately. There might be a way to do an Inventor, but I don't know of it. So you can dimension it that way. But in this case, we just want to dimension this distance. Then you can mention, oh, here's a good use case. You could do this point down here. I want this to be 100 millimeters. Boom. Now this portion of it is fully constrained. You notice how I can't move this line anymore. I can't move this line anymore. Can't move this anymore. It's locked in place, and that's good. Oh, another thing I'm just going to say, never use this. There is a use case for it, but you're a ways away from ever using it, and I don't use it because it breaks things a lot. It locks things dimensionally. It's a bad, just don't touch it. Just don't touch it. Just trust me. Don't use it. Hey, I'm at 11 minutes already. And like, we've just made this. So I might do a part 2, honestly, just that way the video's not ridiculously long. All right, so what's the next thing I could do? Okay, so another thing you'll notice with this sketch is these lines, I wanted them to line up, but I didn't click perfectly. So what you can do is you can make them coincident. There's 2 ways. You can move it over here and drag it and line it up, and now it's coincident. The way I usually do it is I just click on the coincident tool, which makes it so that way 2 things are actually touching that weren't originally, or you thought they were, but they're not, whatever. It allows things to make things touch. That's very important because you need things to actually close. Because even though this is fully, like, even though it looks like those lines are touching, if you try and, oh, it does work in Fusion. This doesn't work in Inventor most of the time. Just make things coincident. It doesn't matter. So one more tool. So another thing is with the horizontal vertical tool that you can use is, let's say I want this to be lined up with this. A good way to do it is with horizontal vertical tool. If you click on a point, another point, it'll lock it in like that. This also works for things vertically. So yeah, you can probably understand how that works. Let's say I wanted this to be 40 millimeters. And I also wanted this to be 40 millimeters. The better way to do this, well, especially if those dimensions are intentionally like the same dimension, if that makes any sense, like if they just happen to be the same dimension, then maybe you wouldn't do this. But if they are the same dimension, and if you were to change it, you want both to change, you should make it equal. So generally speaking, you want to make things equal if you want them to be the same dimension. So you click on that, boom, they're the same length. Pretty easy to understand. This also works with circles. So like if I have a circle here and a circle here, click on this, you click on this, boom, you got 2 circles the same dimension. And if you change the dimension of one, it'll change the dimension of the other. But if you make things equal, do not dimension the other one, because this will bring up a fun little dialog box. Over constraining sketches. This is very, 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 very bad to do. Never do this. If this pop-up ever comes, it means you made a mistake somewhere. That's perfectly fine. This pop-up comes up for me relatively frequently still to this day, and I've made a lot of CAD parts at this point. Well, not a lot for like a professional, but for like a high school student, I made quite a few at this point. So if you see this, it means you did something wrong. It means that you gave Fusion too much information about some specifics. That means you should click OK, undo, and you will not do it. This can also pop up if you make things equal twice or whatever. Actually, wait. Yeah, if you like give things too many constraints, it works for dimensions, it works for constraints. If you give Fusion too much information about something, it'll get mad because you want to use as little information as possible, if that makes any sense. So now let's wrap this up. So I want this to be lined up with this. So one way you could do it is with the horizontal vertical tool, like we talked about earlier. The other way you can do this is with collinear. It makes it that way two lines are in line with each other. Boom. Woohoo. Now they are in line with each other. This also, the reason you use collinear is, let's say you have two lines, like one over here and one over here. You can make them in line with each other. So it also works for diagonals. Notice how they stay in line. Yeah. Let's make these collinear. Click on the whole line, that's better. Let's make this equal. Let's finish dimensioning this. Let's make this whatever it says it is. Yeah, 100, that worked out. Let's make this, let's just make it equal. And we'll make this equal with this. That's almost all the things you need from 2D sketching. So I think that's the end of this little video. You'll notice that everything is white. If I try to move anything, it won't budge. That's very good. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was useful. I know I was moving kind of quickly, but with this now you understand how to locate geometry. So in the next video, I'm going to show you some more, I won't call it quite advanced level, but just more basic stuff, because I want to think of a good sketch to make for things like using actual shapes, using mirror. Text is pretty obvious. I'll just show you right now. You can make a text box, pretty simple. And you can also put it set to a path. So if you want to be on line with that, it also works. Text on path also works for diagonals. It also works for, what's it called? Circles and arcs, which are like, just like a curve that's like based off a circle. So yeah, that's pretty much it for really basic Fusion sketching. Thank you for watching. The next video will come out at some point soonish. I don't know exactly when these are going to come out, but I'm going to go and record the next one later today, probably, once I think of a good sketch to make. See you guys.